Good morning, y'all. We are live on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, but we want to be live on Facebook as well. So we're going to bring in Mile High Huddle. We're going to bring in the Mile High Huddle podcast, and we're going to bring in the Mile High Huddle Denver Broncos super fans group on Facebook and see if we can't get the whole family in here, because I know y'all have a lot to talk about 24 hours later. See if see how we're feeling a little bit now that we've slept on a little bit. I call this one the morning after podcast on Monday morning. And good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Kennedy. I will be your host today. I go by Scout Kennedy on the Twix, Twitter X. I'm just going to start calling that Twix from now on until Twix sends me a letter, a cease and desist. I will be by myself today, except just on camera because I'm here with all of y'all. And I certainly appreciate you joining me this morning for all the things that you want to try and talk about today after what I put in the description as a gut-wrenching loss. And I think that qualifies with no hyperbole to the Washington Commanders yesterday for a whole host of reasons that we will get into. As the chat is opening up and breathing just a little bit and going out and finding all of our lost Broncos with their alerts, notifications, and everything, I want to say hello to some folks that made a point to come here nice and early. I certainly appreciate it. Franklin Peterson says, another Bronco Monday with more questions than answers. Yeah, I think that's true. We have a lot of questions, lots of questions. Jeremy Sean says, morning, boys. 0-2 against easy teams is a sad, sobering place to be. I have confidence in Sean's offense and with Russ, but not with his ability to hire a defensive coordinator. And part of that can also be the personnel. When we were talking earlier, way earlier, during the coaching search, it was a little sobering to think, okay, the top two guys are probably going to be Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. They're going to want pretty much total control of this thing as they come in. Where does that leave George Payton? I don't know how much Payton has to do with any of this, but I'm sure Sean Payton has final say on all these personnel decisions. And I've seen so many coaches crash and burn because of their arrogance, thinking that they can be general managers as well. Coaching and scouting are two very, very different skill sets. And I've been around it enough to know that coaches think they can scout without fail. Scouts don't necessarily think they can coach. And there's something to it. And it's not all that hard to pick out a player if you're a decent scout. But what comes down to it is then being the coach, if I'm the one that's hiring you and drafting you and signing your contract as a general manager and coaching you, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. So it ends up being detrimental to the team. So I'm much more about personnel than I am X's and O's. And I can go through and start looking, where have the personnel decisions gone wrong? Where are some of the things that we could see in hindsight? Like, this was a questionable decision. Something as easy as, why are you going through camp with a kicker that has been a practice squad guy and someone who just had a mental breakdown in the playoffs, and then replacing him with someone that another team just cut, and by the way, you traded for him? That opens yourself up pretty much. That's a questionable decision right away. And we can get into a lot more of those. Duke Rose says, blow it up. That is the track that the Broncos are on right now. We've said all along, going through, looking at the contracts, once Cortland Sutton got his new contract, when Tim Patrick got his new contract, when you look at the free agent contract from Randy Gregory, when you look at Justin Simmons' contract, when you look at Garrett Bowles' contract, there's 5 big money contracts right there. All of them become much more flexible after the 2023 season, all 5 of them. The problem is about half of the money that you could get back by restructuring and or releasing and or trading or making a move on those guys, about half of that money would go to Russell Wilson. Whether you get rid of him or not, he's getting his money. So that's a concern. It makes it harder to do a legit reboot when you're carrying a bunch of dead money. Ask the Chicago Bears, ask the Atlanta Falcons, who have done that and carried a bunch of dead money. And then it took 2 years for them to come out from under that, where they could start spending some money. So we can get into all of those things about, hey, where do you blow this up and how does it get better? When can it get better quickly? I want to say hello to Addison, coming in nice and yellow this morning with a nice super chat. Thank you, my friend. He says, it would suck to have to trade PS2, but if you would get one of the top 2 quarterbacks in 24, then that's a price the Broncos should pay. you think they can get what the Jags got for Ramsey from the Rams. I don't remember exactly what that was. But I think you could get whatever the highest cornerback has ever gone for and then some for him because he's younger. I think he was younger than Ramsey when Ramsey was moved. Not 100% sure on that, but he will be he still have 2 more years of cost control on him with a 4th year and a 5th year option. And as good as he is, it's almost like having, well, I've got the best. I like to use different analogies from different sports. I got the best closer in the game, but my starting pitching is terrible. So I never get to my closer. If you've got a great cornerback, but you don't have anything else, what difference does it make? So yeah, if to give away a foundational piece, a perennial all-pro player, you better get back some building blocks, a lot of them, where you can actually improve your team because you can improve at 4 or 5 different positions. And that's what it would take. It would take 3 or 4 draft picks plus a start. It would take 4 or 5 draft picks and maybe a starting level guy, or a couple of first rounders that you could spin into 2 more second rounders and a starting level guy. You would need to get the equivalent of 5 starters across your team for a Pat Surtain. And if this all goes bad, and if someone gets on the phone and says, "Hey, we're a Super Bowl contender," this guy is the final piece to our defense, and we think it'll make the difference, then everybody has a price, even Pat Surtain. Casey Nickel comes in. Appreciate you, Casey. He says, "Where do we go from here? Who does Denver replace George with? Draft Sanders, please." There's an assistant GM. I think his last name's Ireland with the New Orleans Saints. That's the guy I think you're keeping an eye on. I will be very, very, very surprised. I'm a little surprised George Paton made it this year. I was asked in January, does George Paton, or after Sean Payton was hired, is George Paton the general manager of this team? I said, I think he'll be out by August. I'll be freaking shocked if he is the general manager of this team in 12 months. Absolutely flabbergasted shocked if George Paton is the general manager on this team in 12 months. Whether it's his decision, listen, I was here to be in charge, and now I'm kind of the number 2. I've got a chance to go be a general manager somewhere else where I've got more say in things. Or it's just like, listen, I'm more comfortable having my own guy in here, which I think is more likely to happen from Sean Payton. Where do we go from here, Casey? You focus all of your attention to the Miami Dolphins. All of the doom and gloom that we're talking about right now, how it feels to lose these 2 teams at home, 2 favored. If you go on the road and pull an upset in Miami against the Miami Dolphins, these last 2 weeks are gone. They are flushed, gone. You're 1-2. You beat an AFC heavyweight favorite. Literally, I think they're one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the AFC. You beat them in their home. You win the game. You're back on track. The flip side, when you're watching these Denver Broncos, is you see glimpses. It's the hope that kills, right? You see glimpses of what this offense can be, what this defense can be, what the special teams can be. We've seen glimpses of all of that. And then and what it's led to this point is like, all right, which one of these units is going to fail to cost us the game this time? If it all comes together, the positive side of that is, hey, if it all comes together, we can play with anybody out there. We can play with the Miami Dolphins on the road if we bring out the offense that was out there in the first half, if we bring out the defense that was out there in the first half, if we bring out the team that played the second half against the Washington Commanders, we're looking at a top 5 pick. So there are growing pains to be expected with a new staff, a new culture, a lot of new players, and you're hoping it trends in the right direction. It's hard to do that after starting 0-2. You needed some positive momentum. You needed some of the veterans on this team to not think, okay, here we go again. I want to say hello to Naj. Naj said he was about done. I'm not going to watch another game until the meet and greet. Well, we're glad you're here with us. And he says, it's devastating knowing the season is over after week 2. I believe yesterday's game was the end of the Russ era. He has no confidence in the pocket. Fans won't be mentally able to watch this knowing the defense can't stop anyone. And it is. I get it. That said, though, No confidence in the pocket. If you watch the big throws, y'all, we're family here. Most everybody here, and if you haven't listened to me before, welcome in. I know there's going to be some new faces in here on as we keep growing this channel. We're about to hit 20,000 on YouTube. As we keep growing the podcast, I've said before about Russell Wilson. You never see him take a 5-step drop, plant and fire. You never see him take a 7-step drop, plant and fire. You know what I saw on the 2 long passes to Marvin Mims? I saw him drop back in the pocket, plant and fire with a nice pocket around him. Good pass protection, finding the open guy on the mismatch. You've got enough wide receivers out there. Someone's in single coverage, finding it, drop back, and delivering a freaking dime. I saw that from Russell Wilson. I saw it several times from Russell Wilson. I know he can still play in this league. His numbers were good. Take it out. If you take expectations away from reality, I know that's almost impossible to do. You think Russell Wilson played a good game. Russell Wilson is not living up to everything you gave up for him, and he is not worth the money that he is contractually obligated to for the Denver Broncos the next few years. That may never happen. But is he the reason why this team is losing games? As I watch the Denver Broncos, I can come up with 7 or 8 reasons before I get to Russell Wilson on why they lost that game yesterday. One of them's unlucky. Yes. And as I'm watching that, I'm thinking, unlucky. Why are you unlucky? You can call it, I know Jeremy Shawn hit me up during a couple times about the officials. He asked me, Sean Payton's teams were 31, 32, et cetera, and with the Saints forever in penalties. And he really believes that there was a problem with they had a personal problem with Sean Payton. And I responded back. I'm like, do you think the Raiders led the league in penalties because they committed the most penalties 30 straight years? No, there was a vendetta against Al Davis. So yeah, there's some of that, something to that. So I'm watching this game yesterday. I see a beautiful, beautiful block from Ben Powers, big money free agent. It's 21-3. You're saying, okay, now we want to run the ball. Now we want to just run it and run it down their throats. Javonte Williams, this is who we want to be. We want to get out ahead. We want to use play action. We want to use a running game. We want to get a lead, and then we want to just run it down their damn throats. Watching this play, Javonte Williams goes up, 6-7 yards, battering ram type of run. And as I'm watching, I see Ben Powers one-on-one with a defensive tackle. And it may have been my guy, Abdullah Anderson from the Falcons, who I've been talking up. Is a reserve level, but is a good player. Just buried him. Absolutely buried him and rolled him over. I'm watching this on condensed, and I see they get back to him. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? They called a holding penalty on Ben Powers for a pancake block. It was atrocious officiating. Just ridiculous. Very next play was the fumble. The very next play after the penalty was the fumble. Game changes. Now, this team needs to be strong enough, and there's enough opportunities to overcome those hills and peaks and valleys and adversity. There's enough opportunities over the course of a 60-minute game to overcome a bad call, to go through adversity of a turnover, to go through the adversity of your safety taking another headshot at a guy. There's room for that. There's plenty of opportunities. This team doesn't take them. They don't take advantage of them. Why? Maybe it's coming. Maybe that's part of the growing process. But Naj, I get it. As far as, Russell Wilson, the end of the era, Zach and I got into that a little bit last night, and just thinking that, he's still on the Russ bandwagon as Russ can play. So am I. I think Russ can play. My questions become around the rest of this team is, can you rebuild this team with Russ still as your quarterback, knowing how many resources you have to put into him to keep him? Or are you better off just cutting bait, bench him, mothballing him and say, okay, we got to get a young quarterback. Let's put him in and build. And the Russ era is over. I think that's a distinct possibility, Naj. Jesse coming in with the super chat. Asked the question, says, given the rebuild, I'm thinking 2026, 27 before this team is good again. It could be faster than that. We've seen teams bounce back quicker. This is a league of forced parity, but you have to make the right decisions. And knowing that the contracts, for whatever it's worth, other than the Russell Wilson contract. George Paton has done a really good job of salary cap management with this team. You will have the ability to invest resources back into free agents and rebuild. The only guys that you're really tied to after this year financially, well, Russell Wilson is one. Whether he's on the team or not, he's going to be on the books. And then some of your newer free agents. After that, that's about it. You can move on from pretty much everybody. The question becomes, and I think it's Bob Morris has an article coming out on Mile High Huddle later talking about players that the Broncos should trade. The problem is there's not a lot of trade. When you're talking trade, you think young, talented, cheap. Okay, that and premium positions. There's four. There's like 4 check marks you've got to tick in order to get good value back on trades. How many Broncos does that fit? Where you can say young, talented, cheap, premium position. Relatively speaking, does Jerry Jeudy tick those boxes? Maybe it's at least 3 of them for sure. He becomes less cheap next year. We already talked about Pat Surtain, and I know that's going to sound crazy. But you know, if one guy can bring you 5 starters back to upgrade the team, you got to think about it. If you get the right deal, everybody's for sale. Doug Raquel coming in with the stars on Facebook. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Spawner says trade Jeudy and Sutton. So this gets back to the question I'm posing to y'all, because I kind of joke about this all the time. I don't want this guy on my team anymore. He costs too much. He's always hurt. He's unproductive. He's lazy. I can't stand him. Trade him. Who wants that guy? Trade him for what? Cortland Sutton has an $18 million contract next year. Your options with Cortland Sutton are probably going to be restructure if you want to extend him, lower that salary cap, but then you're going to be tied to him financially for 2 or 3 more years. You might be able to find a trade where you're eating some of that money, but you're probably better off as a salary cap maneuver and you cut him, because nobody's going to pick up that money. Nobody's going to pick up the salary, the base salary on his contract. You might be better off if he's not willing to do a restructure that would cut his cap by 75%. Tim Patrick's gone. That's one you're definitely going to make a move there. Nobody's trading for Tim Patrick either. That you might be better off with the full boat salary, recouping the salary cap money from cutting him, than doing that. And then you make a move with Jerry Jeudy. So then you better get something in return where I can then rebuild some receivers. So if I get $15 million back in Cortland Sutton money next year, I'm probably going to have to go out and get a couple of $5 million wide receivers, young wide receivers. Okay. That might help. And then maybe I get a draft pick back out of it. But that's part of the problem. We start talking about players that you can trade. There's not a lot of tradable assets out there. And and anybody that I'm sure they're in here, I can't see the whole chat today. It's too busy. Thank you all for being here. I'm sure there's some comments in there about how asinine it would be to trade Pat Surtain. And to a certain extent, like I said, everybody, if I get the right deal, anybody's for sale. But that's what it takes to trade. To get any kind of value out of a trade, you got to give up something you don't want to keep. I mean, that you want to keep. They've got to have value to your team. Otherwise, how are they going to have value to another team? Wanted to keep Albert O. What did you get for Albert O in a trade? Nothing. You got a 2025 swap of a 6th and a 7th round pick. Yippee. 2025. You move up from the 7th to the 6th round. Man, that's nothing. And we're talking about Albert Okwuegbunam as if he's the missing piece here. Trade KJ Hamler. Nobody's picked him up with health concerns. You've got to have these questions about, like I said, 4 different things out there in order to actually get some value of a trade. There's just not a lot there. Talking about smart. It's dumb to trade Surtain if we're not talking multiple first-round picks. Yeah, we are. And Albert O isn't on Surtain level. No kidding. Really? But that's the point, dude. You don't have anybody else on Patrick Surtain's level. You don't have a lot of tradable assets. That is my point. Let me see here. Mark Schrader coming in. Says, watching, and I felt like Simmons didn't have a good game at all. Do you think maybe he was trying to catch trying to do too much after KJ got booted. I don't think so. I think on a play at the end of the second half, he got his bell rung pretty good too. That might be part of it. He was playing super deep. Ball goes up the right sideline. He makes a hit out of bounds and comes up a little slow. It takes a lot for an NFL football player to come up slow. Something hurts after every play. After every play that you play in football, something hurts. Whether it's, it just, you rub it off, it's just a bruise, out, got one sharp. To keep a guy down, that could have lingered on for the rest of the game when he got up slow like that. And I don't know what it was, and I don't know if they'll say anything about it, but there may be something to it. Ethan coming in here, and we've discussed this last night, and this gives me a chance to have this discussion with y'all on a little bit longer of a basis. Thank you, Ethan, for coming in. He says, the problem is clear. Lack of talent on the defensive side. Until the shelf is replenished there, we will continue to see what we have seen the last 2 weeks. This isn't new. Under Vic and Evero, the defense caved always at the end of the half. Couple of pretty good defensive coordinators. I would argue that the defenses I saw last year were still overall better than what I've seen so far. I don't remember seeing a Vic Fangio or a Giro Evero defense the last 2 years give up second and third quarter 5 straight scoring drives. Forget, the fourth quarter, end of the game. These guys have been out on the field forever and they collapse, give up a score at the end and end up losing. I'm talking second and third quarter when you go from 21-3 and you're to being down 2 scores. That said, I am much more about personnel than I am schemes. And when I'm down to, when I go into battle with my safeties is Caden Stearns with an injury history, and I re-signed Kareem Jackson. We know what a liability he is as a player, let alone as a guy who has a chance to get thrown out. And then I draft someone coming off an injury in JL Skinner, who's a rookie in the 6th round, who was injured. I get into that game, and all of a sudden I'm down to Turner Yell and Hussein Bassi at safety because those 3 guys aren't available. That's a personnel problem. That's a personnel decision-making problem for me. Safeties aren't expensive. I could have gone out and spent $3 million on a safety and had a pro, a 5, 6, 7, 8 year pro on this team to back Caden Stearns and have a little more insurance there. And I don't want to hear about leadership. I don't want to hear it. Make him a coach. Kareem Jackson brings leadership to this team. Then make him a coach. What kind of example is he setting getting fined and thrown out of games? Make him a coach. If you think that leadership is what he brings to this team, bring him in as a consultant. You don't necessarily want to have him on the team, on the field. No, you don't. I think he's got a suspension coming. We'll see. I guarantee his last hit was $15,000. This one might be double that, and it might cost him a game or 2. Talking about the resources being put into this team. I posed this question to Zach last night because when Ethan asked this, it got me to thinking, where in the last 3 years that I've been covering this team have the Broncos legitimately upgraded on defense at any one spot? And there's only one that I think you can answer without a doubt, without any argument, that you've gotten better. I don't even know who you replaced. Doesn't matter. He's just that good. And it's Pat Surtain. Across the front, Zach Ellen better than Draymond Jones? Maybe. We haven't seen it yet. We go to the edges. Randy Gregory, Von Miller, Jonathan Cooper, Bradley Chubb. I know who I'm taking there. We go to Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton. Solid, but nothing spectacular at that point. Cornerbacks. My number 2 is Damari Mathis, and I've already gone through the safety problem I've got. I'd say a no there. So personnel-wise, and let's not even get into the backups. We've already talked about the backups, the problems you have on the defensive line as starters. If Jonathan Harris is my starter on the defensive line, I have questions. I have big questions about my defensive line. Watching these pass rushers, there's 4 average guys out there. Randy Gregory is a hell of an athlete. He cannot get off a block. I'm pretty much convinced. Didn't get to see him enough last year to watch him. He gets pursuit sacks because he's a hell of an athlete. He'll get a speed rush. So will Nick Bonito. He'll get a speed rush every so often. But if they get locked up, they're not pushing them back. They're not spinning out of them. They're not cutting inside. They're not swimming. They're not ripping. They're not doing anything. They're getting locked up. The pass rush without just pure speed rushing is a problem. So, yes, you're going to have to put some resources into the defense if you want to have a better defense. Ethan, thank you so much for the super chat, and as always, the good conversation. I want to check in on my Facebook crowd over here. Apologies to George and all y'all that I didn't get to a lot of these last night. We'll make it up to you for sure. I think we had 2,500 comments in the chat yesterday on YouTube. So no, I wasn't necessarily keeping up with those. 2,500 comments in the chat. So it was busy. It was busy. Keith comes in and says 5 years, 245 million going to Russell Wilson as a start, adding Gregory, Sutton, and Patrick. You're not getting returns on any of these contracts right now. Yeah, and the good news is, and I could put Bowles in there. The good news is Gregory's contract, you can get out from under it next year. Sutton's contract, you can get out from under it next year. Patrick's contract, you can get it out from under it for next year. Randy Gregory, we can talk all the big money you want to, and let me bring up his contract numbers because that's what gets stated. And I always roll my eyes and say, listen, this is what this contract really means, because the numbers that you hear are pretty bogus. His contract, let's see, what was it stated as? Spot Rex a little slow coming up. His contract was saying he signed a 5-year, $70 million contract. No, he didn't. He didn't. He's not going to see a dime over the next two. If he doesn't pick it up right now, he's a cut candidate. And his contract will be 2 years, $26 million. Next year, he has a $16 million cap hit against a $6 million dead cap. You save $10 million if you cut him. Guess what? He's going to get to keep the signing bonus that was part of the 2 years and $26 million, and $6 million you're going to have to cost next year. So we'll have a $6 million dead cap, but you get $10 million back. Patrick Sutton, the same way. You're going to have to carry some dead cap, but you get a lot of money back. You're going to have some dead cap money next year, one way or another, because you're going to make some big changes. David Romero, Sotelo, McGlinchey is horrible. He was getting blown up every down. He was probably the biggest liability on the offensive line yesterday, and you got to hope he plays his way into form. He missed a lot of training camp. He's with a new team. He's feeling the pressure, I'm sure, of that big contract. We are talking about the contracts that get better. His contract gets exponentially worse next year. The man has a $6 million cap hit this year, just 6. He's actually behind Josie Jewell on his cap hit for this year. His $6 million cap hit goes to dead cap. He goes to 18.5 next year with a $29 million dead cap. So you cannot make that change. He's getting an $18 million dead cap hit unless you can restructure that somehow. And if he's not playing better, I don't know that you want to extend him further down the line. You've got to get a return on that one for sure. Let me see. Doug, I said thank you for the stars, for coming in with the stars like that. Thank you so much. Wonder where our friend Michael is. That's who I didn't get to see yet. So Michael Ranquillo, if you're out there, I know he's out there. I saw him this morning on YouTube. So thank you for being here. We're at 30 minutes right now. We've got about 300 people watching. That is a lot for our morning show. If you're new here, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the share so we can find more Broncos fans just like you. Certainly appreciate all the new faces on here. So thank you so much. You can find me on Twitter/X, the Twix, at Scout Kennedy. Want to go through some more of the, how does this get better? One of the questions that comes in is Baked asked the question. I thought Riley Moss was hurt. He was. And I think he's close. It wouldn't surprise me to see him coming back next week. Greg Dulcich did end up getting IR'd, so he's out for 4 weeks. I've got so much of this going through my mind. That's what I remember seeing at the end of last week. So he's out. Going into the game a little bit from yesterday, Michael said he was early in the show. Thank you. It scrolled off of, I had a feeling Michael was here. Thank you for the stars and the support, my friend. As Brian says, he's new here. Hit the like. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. And even if you got that W, we don't mind fans from other teams coming in. I do have a cough drop in. Apologies. I've been going solo for a little bit, and I'm gonna need to hit on this. Hopefully, it won't rattle around on my teeth. That's what this is. Betty says hi. Hey guys. Hey y'all. Good to see you. Glad you are here. Diamond's still pissed. Says fire VJ. Ha. Sean hired him. Clamoring for Vance Joseph firing is like asking for Sean Payton's firing. There's something to that. I said last night I would very, very much like to hear the reasoning between the choice that was being made or whether it was made for them. Rex Ryan could have said, hey, listen, I'm just trying to get a better contract from TV. Can you put me into the debate here so I can get a new contract? Could have been that, frankly. When I've gone to hire people and I knew that I couldn't get them, they were going to stay where they were going to be. I'm like, hey, at least talk to me. Let me get you some more money. Let me get you a raise. Go back and tell them I offered you X and they'll give you X plus 5. Let me get you some more money. But I would love to hear the reasoning why Rex Ryan, why Vance Joseph was chosen as the Denver Broncos defensive coordinator over Rex Ryan. Was it the media circus around Rex Ryan? Too much ego, better scheme fit, helped us get Zach Allen. I don't know. I'd love to hear the backstory on that one. Money comes in and says, I feel there will be a new injury every week. There probably will be. I mean, it's football. You just hope that they're not too bad. And you hope that some of the guys who were injured start coming back. So it's at least you're not going backwards. Riley Moss could be a big help to this team. He was drafted high. He's a hell of an athlete, instinctive football player. He's a warrior out there. And when I'm watching this team, you start asking yourselves the questions like, where are the real warriors on the team? Where are the guys that when the going starting to get tough, who's going to get a little nasty? And I don't mean Kareem Jackson nasty. I mean, fired up. You know what I'm talking about. You know it when you see it. Who are the fighters out there? Who are the ones that are battling and not just going out and doing a job? Riley Moss can be one of those guys too. Justin Simmons, Pat Surtain, love them. Extremely talented players, but they're not warriors, so to speak. They're not the ones out there getting everybody fired up. And it's especially on defense is incredibly emotional. That I think Riley Moss can really, really help this team. And as TWI guy says, there are no warriors. That's the problem. I think Randy Gregory has some of it in him. And I don't mind that a little bit. Walk up to that edge, don't cross it. I think Alex Singleton has a little bit of that in him. Watching him, he plays with a little fire. He does. He plays with a little fire. Isaiah Stack says Drew Sanders can be that, but he doesn't see the field. Naj agrees with me. He says K-Jax will be suspended at least 1, possibly 2 games. Time to go out there and find another safety. They're out there. They can be had. I can get safeties off practice squads. Benito looked good. Benito looked good at times, and then he looked like a liability at times. The left tackle that got beat on a speed rush for Benito's first sack, shame on him. I mean, make Benito come into your chest. Step outside and make him come across you. That's a lack of preparation and good for Benito. Hey, I'm going to go outside until you prove that I can't. That said, there were 4 sacks in this game by the Denver Broncos. 2 of them came on the first series. I think the third one came on the second series. The Commanders were throwing mid-second quarter on, and you only had 1 more sack. That is a little bit of a problem. That's a little bit of a problem. A couple things I wanted to get into. We're probably going to cut it short here, about 45 minutes or so, because my voice is starting to give out. I felt like the Broncos got away from what was working to a certain extent. And part of that is, as Sean Payton says, well, they dictated coverage, blah, 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 coach speak, coach speak, coach speak. But some of the things that we went into last week saying we wanted to see more of, we saw them earlier. Drew Sanders was on the field in the first series. Randy Gregory gets a sack and makes an impact. A hustle play down. He also had a nice hustle play where the sweep went his way and around him, and he made the tackle down on the 5. Good hustle play. That was right before the Commanders' first touchdown. Marvin Mims. How do we get more plays? How do we get Marvin Mims involved? 2 great passes, good protection. That was, I think, 2 minutes into the second quarter. He had a second catch. He had 2 catches for 113 yards, 17 minutes into this game. He finished the game with 2 targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. Never saw the ball again. Never saw, literally, not just didn't make a catch, never saw the ball again. Jaleel McLaughlin, that change-up back, that speed, nice touchdown, well blocked. Props to the left side of the line. Fullback, Burton, unsung hero of this game. Tight end, I'm not sure which one it was, if it was Manhertz or Troutman came in. And then wide receiver had a really good block. Never really saw him again either after that play. He finishes with Jaleel McLaughlin with 1 carry for 5 yards. There you go. So, okay, it wasn't just my imagination. 1 carry for 5 yards and a touchdown. That was it. Okay, I understand they're going to do things, but are they really scheming to take away your rookie running back? Change it up a little bit. Getting away from some of that stuff. And it was Jonathan Cooper that had the coverage sack. So they had 3 sacks from 3 different players in the first 2 series, but then only had 1 more. Then on my notes, it says that holding call on Ben Powers was a pancake block that the Broncos just got hosed on. That one was tough. That was tough. Isaiah Sachs, we appreciate you, Mr. Kennedy. Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Those were some of the things I wanted to get into today. We can get into when Nick gets back. We'll start talking tomorrow. I think he's back tomorrow. We'll talk more about what, the different things that the Broncos can do internally to get better, or if we're looking forward to 2024. I guess one more thing I want to get into on this, and I saw Naj hit on it, so more than once. We'll keep talking if you jog my memory here. Who made the call to play Fabian Moreau? That guy played 2 plays and cost us 2 drive stopping situations. You cannot have players making those mistakes on the field. I don't know how many. I'll have to look at his snap count. He was on the field, but I know he was on. He had 2 defensive holding calls on him. There's a lot of new folks in here, but I watched Fabian Moreau in Atlanta for 2021, and he was the worst defensive player on a very, very bad team, a very bad defense. He doesn't need to be on the 53. God bless him, but he's a liability. He doesn't need to be out there. You need to find better somehow, some way. It can't be that hard. Fabian Moreau was tough. It's a tough call out there. Let's see. So the Fabian Moreau one. Oh, here it is. One of my notes. We talk about screens. If you listen to Eric Trickle hates screen passes. I love them. I love screen passes. I hate them for this Denver Broncos team. Hate them. When they started going short passing game and it started working, they started going outside. They were not screens, because a screen doesn't work with this team. Whether it's I want to run a middle screen and I can't get the ball over the defenders who see the screen coming and they get their hands up, or I try and run a screen outside and my offensive linemen aren't mobile enough to get outside. You want to watch a screen team? Washington screened you to death. First play of the fourth quarter? The first play of the fourth quarter. 36-yard screen play to open the fourth. They did that multiple times. They got 20 yards on a screen play in the second quarter to help bring them back into the game. It's personnel, it's scheme, but I think this one boils down to more personnel when it comes to the inability for the short passing game to be what you want it to be in this offense, because you lack the personnel to run it properly. The Washington Commanders ran it properly. Sam Howell looked great. I didn't give him enough credit coming into this game. I won't make that mistake again. That wasn't just bad Broncos defense. Sam Howell played a good game. He did. He played a good game. Bake says, I don't think we have the talent on the receiving core to pull off as many screen passes as we tried. Most of the screen passes, though, won't go to wide receivers. You might run a bubble screen here and there. And if you do that, you really won't worry about the offensive line. You'll run trips to the right, and you might have two inside receivers. One of them could be a tight end. One of them could be a bigger wide receiver like Cortland. You have your outside receiver cut underneath behind those guys, catch a quick pass, and then take off. That's a wide receiver screen. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'd actually like to see more of those to set up. You do that 2 times, then you pump it and go, and you got something there with a fake screen. I'm talking about screens to the running backs. The running backs should be a huge part of your offensive arsenal in the short passing game, and they're just not so far. Denver receiving, you had Samaje Perine had 4 targets. He had 3 receptions for 20 yards, so not too bad. 3 targets to Javonte. So, 3 catches from your leading receiver, 5 total. 5 total receptions is what Alvin Kamara had when he was playing for Sean Payton. He had 80 catches a season. So for me, the screen passing into your running backs involved, I'm not sure if you've got the personnel. They keep trying, but it hasn't worked that well. Talking about injuries, and is somebody going to get hurt every week? Probably. That's just the game. But you're hoping some of these guys come back. Some of these guys you're hoping to get back soon. Baron Browning, Riley Moss, K'Wan Williams. Where do those guys play? Defense. That'll help. That'll help for sure. Getting those guys back will help you a lot more than the loss of Kareem Jackson. That I don't feel like that's a hot take. On that note, y'all, I am going to get out of here while I can still talk a little bit. Thank you so much for coming in and joining me today. Let me check Facebook one more time because Lawrence has a question that I missed with some stars. He says, what's up, guys? It's going to be a long year. I hope ownership starts reflecting our record on the price of tickets, or I'll just go fishing. It's almost ice fishing season. Don't expect ticket prices to come down. That rarely happens. Don't expect them to come down. P-Mall has a point. He says Fabian Moreau would not have been out there if it wasn't for Kareem Jackson. Kareem Jackson has been the liability. This is potato for me. Is Fabian Moreau out there because Kareem Jackson is out there because Isaiah Bassi ended up having to be the 4th safety when you lost Caden Stearns, you lost Kareem Jackson, then Dorian Turner-Yell ends up getting hurt. I have to put Isaiah Bassi in at safety. I'm on my 4th safety. Why am I on my 4th safety? Because Caden Stearns was an injury liability. Kareem Jackson is old. And J.L. Skinner, the guy that you drafted, was hurt already as a rookie and either hasn't been healthy or can't be counted on. So I had to go to Isaiah Bassi. 1, 2, 3 are things that I knew going into the season. I knew all those things. Fabian Moreau as a safety on the active, or as a corner on the active roster, while Isaiah Bassi moves to cornerback, Fabian Moreau's not good enough to be in this league. He's just not. You knew that going in. Again, it becomes a personnel thing for me on those. Naj says, great. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this isn't Naj. This is Ethan. I say thank you to Naj too, but always Ethan. Great show, Scott. Rest your throat. Have a good day, everyone. Actually, I will, because I'm back tonight with Zach, and we'll have another discussion. Get to sit on this one a little bit, and I'll probe Zach on some of his thoughts and see what he thinks the day after the 24-hour rule. On that note, I'm going to get out of here. Make sure you're following the main accounts at Mile High Huddle. You can find it on Instagram. You can find it on Twix. You can find it on Facebook. You can find me on Twix at Scout Kennedy. Nick will be back tomorrow. Nick Kendell at MHH. Let me see here. Let me hit. This is the one I want you to check out if you haven't already. MHHmerch.com. Some cool stuff coming in. We'll have some of this stuff too, as raffles and giveaways at the meet and greet for the Packers game coming up next month. I'm looking forward to that. And like I said, you can find the Facebook.com Mile High Huddle pod. We'll get all of our shows as well, whether it's Broncos for breakfast or not. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. I'm going to get going. Got to get some work to do. It's been a great morning for everybody. Hope you feel a little bit better today than you did yesterday. That was a gut-wrenching loss. We will be back tonight with Zach on the Mile High Huddle podcast, and then Nick and I will be back tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of me. Sorry, I'm not better looking. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for being here.